Welcome once again, my friends, and thank you for stopping by to listen to an old storyteller. Today we have a story from Greece, and the title of this story is Eros and Psyche. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 3 wonderful daughters. The youngest, Psyche, was much more beautiful than her 2 sisters and looked like a goddess among mere mortals. The fame of her beauty had been spread throughout the whole kingdom, and men kept coming to her palace to admire and worship her. When people would see her, they used to say that not even Aphrodite herself could compete with Psyche. The more people were getting to know Psyche, the less they would remember the goddess of love and beauty. The temples of Aphrodite were abandoned, her altars covered with cold ashes, and the sculptors would make no more statues for her. All the honors reserved to her were then attributed to a simple, mortal girl. The goddess could not accept such a situation and required help from her son, Eros. She told him in distress, "Use your power and make this little shameless girl to fall in love with the vilest and the most despicable creature who has ever walked on earth." Eros agreed to do so, but the moment he saw her, he himself felt his heart pierced by one of his own arrows. He couldn't make that charming maiden fall in love with a horrible creature, but also decided not to tell his mother. Psyche, however, was feeling bad because not only could she not fall in love with someone, but, even more surprising, nobody seemed to really fall in love with her. Men were happy just to admire her. Then they passed by and married another girl. Her 2 sisters, though definitely less seductive, had held 2 lavish weddings, each with a king. Psyche was the most beautiful girl on earth, but she was sad and lonely, always admired, but never really loved. It seemed that no man would want her as his wife, and this caused great anxiety and distress to her parents. That is when her father went to visit the Oracle of Delphi to ask Apollo for advice on what to do to find a husband for Psyche. The prophecy of the god was terrible. Apollo decreed that Psyche, dressed in black dress, should be brought to the summit of a mountain and stay there alone. The husband that was assigned to her, a winged serpent, terrible and more powerful than the gods themselves, would come up and take her for his wife. No one can imagine the despair of the family and friends of Psyche. She was prepared for the hill as if she were to face her death, and with more cries than if they were to drive her to the tomb, they led the young lady to the hill. Desperately, they all departed, leaving Psyche to her fate, radiant and helpless, and they locked themselves in the palace to mourn her for the rest of their days. On the hill and in the dark, Psyche remained seated and waited. While she was shaking and crying in the quiet night, a slight breeze reached her. It was the fresh wind of Zephyr, the mildest of the winds. She felt that she was being raised. She was being taken into the air, over the rocky hill, to a soft meadow full of flowers. He did his best to make her forget her pain and put her to sleep. She then woke by the sound of a clear stream, and when she opened her eyes, she faced an imposing and magnificent castle. It seemed destined to a god, with gold columns, silver walls, and floors of inlaid precious stones. Absolute silence ruled. It seemed uninhabited, and Psyche approached cautiously to admire its splendors. She remained suspicious at the threshold, where she heard a noise, but could not see anyone. However, she could clearly hear the words, "The house is for you. Come in and do not be afraid. Take a bath, and we will immediately honor you with a great dinner." Never had she taken such a refreshing bath, nor tasted such delicious dishes. While eating, she heard a soft music about her, like a harp accompanying a numerous choir. She heard it, but she could not see it. The whole day she was alone, only accompanied by the voices. But somehow she knew her husband would come at night, and so it was. When she felt he was close to her and heard his voice whispering sweetly in her ear, her fears disappeared. Without even seeing him, she was certain that he was not a monster, but the loving husband she had always been wishing for. The following days passed in full joy, and Psyche could not remember any happier time of her life. However, day after day, she was feeling sadness that she could not see her husband. Moreover, she was left alone all day, and boredom filled her heart. Suddenly, she started missing her family. They must have been mourning for her, and she was alive and happy. This was not fair, and she didn't want her family to suffer. That night, she asked her mysterious husband to grant her a favor. She wanted her 2 sisters to come up at the palace and make sure that she was fine. That would be a comfort for her old parents. At first, her husband refused, but when Psyche turned out so sad, he told her, "I will allow your sisters to come up here, but I am warning you, do not let them influence you. If they do, you will destroy our relationship and suffer much." Next day, her 2 sisters, carried by the wind, came up to Psyche. They were all happy to see each other and cried in happiness. However, when they entered the palace, the 2 older sisters were amazed by all those magnificent treasures. During dinner, they heard a wonderful music and drank the most delicious of wines. Envy was flourishing in their hearts, and an irresistible curiosity to know the owner of such magnificence, the husband of Psyche. They kept asking the poor girl questions on her husband, his look, and his occupation. Psyche just said that he was a young hunter. But they didn't believe her, of course. Could a simple hunter be so rich? He must be a prince, or even a god, they thought. The 2 sisters knew that compared to Psyche, their own wealth and happiness were nothing at all, and in total jealousy, they made a plan to hurt their sister. When they were saying goodbye, the 2 evil women told Psyche that her husband must be the awful snake that the oracle of Delphi had told her husband. That is why he doesn't allow you to see him, because he knows that if you see him, you will be disgusted by the sight of him and leave him forever. Oh, poor Psyche, how can you sleep with such a horrible creature? From that day on, Psyche could think of nothing else but these words. Her sisters must be right. Why doesn't he come to me in the day? Why doesn't he allow me to see him? What is his secret? Why hasn't he ever told me about his life? These thoughts were puzzling Psyche for many long days. He must be hiding something horrible, and that is why he does not want to be seen in the daylight. I must find out. Tonight, when he falls to deep sleep, I will light a candle to see him. If he is a snake, I will kill him. Otherwise, I will turn the candle off and go happily to sleep. She had taken her decision, forgetting all about her husband's warning. Indeed, that night when her husband fell asleep peacefully, she took courage and lit the candle. Walking on her toes, she approached the bed, and she felt a deep relief. The light did not show a monster, but the most beautiful of men. Ashamed by her madness and her little confidence, Psyche fell down on her knees and thanked the gods for this happiness. But while she was leaning on him, a drop of oil fell from the candle on the back of that handsome young man. He woke in pain and saw the light. He looked her at the eyes, and facing Psyche's distrust, he left their bedroom without uttering a single word. Psyche immediately ran after her husband. It was dark, and she could not see him, but could hear his heartbroken voice. "Love cannot live without trust." Those were his last words before flying to the dark sky. The god of love, she thought. He was my husband, and I did not trust him. She cried and cried for days, and then she decided to do anything to gain him back. She would look everywhere for him, and she would prove her love. Without knowing what else to do, she went to the temple of Aphrodite and prayed to the goddess. She asked Aphrodite to speak to her son and persuade him to get Psyche back. Aphrodite had not, of course, overcome her jealousy for Psyche, and still wanted her revenge. She told the young girl that she needed to be completely sure that Psyche was the appropriate wife for her son. Therefore, Psyche should accomplish 3 tasks to prove her skills. If she failed in even one of these tasks, Eros would be lost forever. Psyche agreed, and Aphrodite led her on a hill. There the goddess showed her a dune of different small seeds of wheat, poppies, millets, and many others. "I want you to separate these seeds by this afternoon. If you do not, I will never let you see Eros again," said Aphrodite, and left. How could she do that? How could she separate all these tiny seeds? This was a cruel task that filled her eyes with tears. That moment, a group of ants was passing by and saw her in despair. "Come, feel mercy for this poor girl, and let us help her," they said to each other. They all responded to this appeal and worked hard, separating the seeds, something in which they were experts. From the big original dune, they formed several smaller dunes, each with one kind of seed. Aphrodite saw these smaller dunes and became angry. "You have not finished your work," she said, and ordered Psyche to sleep on the ground without giving her any food, while she slept in her soft bed. She thought that if she could compel Psyche to hard work for a long time, her beauty would not persist. Meanwhile, Aphrodite would not let her son leave his room, where he was all that time mourning for Psyche's betrayal. Next morning, Aphrodite came up with a new job for Psyche, a dangerous task. "Can you see those black waters descending from the hill? That is River Estige, awful and abhorrent. Fill this bottle with its water," the goddess said. On reaching the waterfall, Psyche realized that the surrounding rocks were slippery and steep. The waters rushed through such abrupt rocks that only a winged creature could approach. And indeed, an eagle helped her. It was flying with its huge wings above the river when it saw Psyche and felt sympathy for her. It seized the bottle from her hands with its beak, filled it with some black water, and gave it back to Psyche. Aphrodite accepted her with a cold smile. "Someone helped you," she said sharply. "Otherwise you would not have been able to perform this task by your own. I'm going to give you another chance to prove that you are as determined as you claim to be." She gave a box to Psyche. She had to take it to the underworld and ask Persephone, queen of the dead, to drain a little of her beauty into the box. Obedient as usual, Psyche took the path leading to Hades. When she entered the gates and took the boat to the other bank, where the dead people used to leave, she gave much money to Charon the boatman to help her find her way in the dark to the palace of Persephone. Indeed, the boatman helped her, and after a while she was right in front of Persephone. When she asked her to drop a drain of her beauty in the box, Persephone was glad to serve Aphrodite. Psyche took the box and returned cheerfully to the earth. When she gave Aphrodite the box, the goddess got extremely angry. She yelled at the poor girl that she would never let her go, and she would always be her servant. At this crucial moment, the gods, who were watching this wrongdoing all this time, decided to take up action. They sent Hermes, the messenger god, to narrate to Eros all the misfortunes that his wife was going through. Eros was touched, and this healed the wound of betrayal. He left his room and found Psyche exhausted in his mother's garden. From that moment on, Eros and Psyche lived happily together in their lovely palace, which was always full of roses and other flowers. Psyche persuaded Eros to forgive his mother for what she had made her suffer. As a wedding gift, Zeus made Psyche immortal and allowed her to taste ambrosia, the drink of the gods. Even Aphrodite was happy because, now that Psyche was living in the sky with her husband, men on earth had forgotten all about her and were again worshiping the true goddess of beauty. Thank you once again for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please press that like button. Also, please help an old storyteller out by subscribing to my channel. The next story will be posted in a few days, so until then, may your story continue to be a good one.